Mornings in my house didn't start with sunshine, they started with noise. The kettle sputtering, my little brother Max whining for cereal, my sister Ellie searching for her shoes, and then the silence that meant Mom hadn't moved from the couch. I remember pressing my palm to her shoulder that day, whispering, "Mom, wake up." Her skin was clammy, the air thick with that sweet rotting smell of cheap vodka. She groaned but didn't open her eyes. I couldn't afford to wait, so I wrapped a blanket over her and pretended she was just resting. Pretending was a full-time job in our house. At 17, I'd already learned the choreography of crisis. Drop toast in the toaster, pour the milk fast before the smell from the sink hit, sign one permission slip for Ellie, braid her hair while nudging Max to brush his teeth. I did everything my mom should have done, except I still had to show up at school pretending my biggest problem was a math whiz. Sometimes, when I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, I'd hardly recognize the tired girl clutching a frying pan-like arm. It wasn't always like this. I used to have parents who danced in the kitchen at midnight. Dad worked construction, came home dusty but smiling, and Mom hummed while folding laundry. Then Dad lost his job and the beer cans multiplied like weeds. Mom used to pour his half-finished bottles down the sink, but one evening she took a sip herself, joking that maybe she'd understand what he liked so much. The joke didn't age well. The day Dad started bringing home bottles instead of paychecks, I started tucking the grocery list into my backpack. At first, I begged him to stop. He promised he could handle. "I'm fine, Lena," he said, slurring, "just stressed." But stress turned to rage, and rage turned the house into a cracked echo chamber where every door slam felt like an earthquake. When Mom followed him into that haze, the world tilted. Bills piled, dinners became whatever I could steal from the pantry at church, and Max began asking questions like, "Why is Mommy sleeping so much?" I built a routine from the ruins. I'd wake before dawn, sweep away the cigarette butts from the counter so the kids wouldn't see, and pack lunches, mostly peanut butter sandwiches, crusts trimmed because Ellie hated them. I'd check homework by flashlight while Mom and Dad whispered fights downstairs. The walls reeked of stale smoke, but I still believed that if I cleaned enough, loved hard enough, something might shift. That morning, while flipping pancakes that sagged in the middle, I made silent promises to get Ellie to college, to keep Max from turning into another version of them, to keep breathing even when the walls screamed back. Outside, the bus horn blared. Inside, Mom stirred, reaching blindly for an empty bottle. I stood there for a second, spatula trembling, staring at the woman who once braided my hair. Then I turned off the stove, gathered my siblings, and walked out to school, to sanity, to anywhere that didn't smell like defeat. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of dull afternoon that tricks you into thinking life might stay still. I'd come home from school soaked in rain, the plastic grocery bag I carried ripping at the corner. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually I could hear Dad's muffled yelling or the low buzz of the TV playing to no one. I called out, "Mom," nothing, my stomach tight. I dropped my backpack and followed the trail of cigarette ash into the living room. No one there. The kitchen empty except for a half-empty bottle and a pile of dishes that smelled like vinegar and hopelessness. Then I heard a whimper upstairs. When I opened the bedroom door, I found Max sitting alone on the floor, wearing a t-shirt soaked through with juice. The window was open, rain had been drifting in for hours. On the nightstand were two burnt-out candles, Mom's last sad attempt at electricity since our bill hadn't been paid. My chest squeezed so tight I thought I'd faint. He looked up at me and said, "Mom went out, Daddy too." He said it like it was normal, like being abandoned was baked into the schedule. I wrapped him in a towel and sat on the cold carpet holding him until the shaking in my hands stopped. That was the moment it hit me. There wasn't going to be a rescue. No teacher, no relative, no miracle intervention. There was only me. Childhood, whatever scraps of it I had left, ended right there next to Max's toy cars and the puddle forming under the window. By evening, Ellie came home from a friend's place, full of stories about her day until she saw Mom's half-empty bottle on the counter. Her voice cracked. "They left again, didn't they?" I nodded. She asked if we could order pizza, like pretending would make it less real. We didn't have money for pizza, so I made tomato soup from a dusty can and 2 slices of stale bread cut into triangles to make it look pretty. That night I turned into a general. I divided chores, wrote a list on the back of an old envelope. Laundry Wednesday, dishes daily, lights out before 9 because electricity was precious. I used the word we instead of I, even though we all knew I was the one holding everything together. Max drew superheroes on the envelope, stick figure versions of us wearing capes. I smiled, but my throat ached. He believed I was some kind of invincible protector, not a terrified teenager balancing the world on her back. When they finally stumbled home, sometime past midnight, the front door crashed open. Dad was laughing at something invisible, Mom clutching a paper bag like treasure. I told them the kids were asleep, that they needed to keep quiet. Dad's eyes went cold. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house." I didn't answer. I just stood there, trembling but still. After he passed out, I locked my siblings' door from the inside and lay on the floor, listening to the muffled snores of 2 people who had forgotten how to care. Ellie couldn't sleep. She whispered into the dark, "Do you think they'll get better?" I wanted to say yes so badly it burned my tongue. Instead, I took her hand and said the safest lie I knew. "Yeah, they will." Her breathing slowed and Max shifted closer, his small arm draped over my chest. I stared at the cracked ceiling, the rain still tapping the glass, and made myself another silent promise. Tomorrow and every day after, I would make sure we were okay. No one else was coming. By the time spring rolled around, I'd mastered the art of deception. To everyone at school, I was just another girl who overslept, forgot her homework, and smelled vaguely like detergent from washing her uniform at night. No one knew that before catching the bus, I had already made breakfast, packed lunches, and coaxed 2 kids into believing everything was fine. I wore exhaustion like mascara, hoping no one could tell the difference. Most mornings I'd drift through hallways half awake, my brain stuck between algebra and survival. Teachers called my name more than once before realizing I wasn't really there. "Lena, eyes up here," they'd scold, and I'd mumble apologies while thinking about whether the gas stove was turned off. I passed notes from friends I didn't hang out with anymore, smiling just enough to appear normal. But panic was was my constant shadow. After school, I started working at Tony's Diner, a small place that smelled of grease, sugar, and possibility. The owner, Tony, didn't ask many questions when I said I was 18. I guess my face carried enough truth even when my words didn't. I wiped tables until my back ached, slipped leftover fries into napkins for Max, and learned how to pretend tips were tiny victories instead of survival tokens. It wasn't glamorous, but when I came home with paper bags of food, the kids' eyes lit up like we'd won the lottery. Keeping the act together got trickier at school. One Monday, I nodded off during geometry. I didn't even realize it until I woke up to Mrs. Dalton, my teacher, leaning over my desk. "Lena, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion wrapped in concern. My heart jumped. "Yeah, just didn't sleep well," I muttered. Her gaze lingered. That afternoon, she called me to her office, mentioning how tired I looked, how I'd missed several assignments. She said quietly, "If there's something going on at home, we can help." My stomach twisted. Help meant questions, and questions meant danger. I smiled. "Everything's fine. My parents just work late." The lie rolled off my tongue like second nature. But lies are tricky, they grow legs. A few days later, I overheard Mrs. Dalton talking to the principal about contacting Child Protective Services. My blood went cold. I'd seen what happened when the system stepped in. Kids get scattered, separated, sometimes lost completely. I couldn't let that happen. That night I wrote fake notes signed Mom to prove someone was home. I even forged a phone number she could call anytime. Desperation made me creative. No one called, but the fear didn't fade. Every buzz of the classroom intercom made my heart jump. I started skipping lunch, using that time to run to the diner early for extra hours. The routine became mechanical. School, diner, home, laundry, pretend sleep. Ellie once begged me to come to her school play, and I promised I would, but my shift ran late. When I reached her classroom, chairs were stacked, stage lights off, and she stood by the door in costume, holding a participation ribbon she didn't care about anymore. I told her I was sorry, but both of us knew sorry was running out of meaning. Walking home that night, the streetlights buzzed overhead, and I realized I built a perfect cage made of love, fear, and duty, and I lived inside it all alone. Everyone thought I was surviving. They didn't see that I was slowly unraveled. The day everything cracked open wasn't even dramatic at first. It began with me counting coins on the kitchen counter, trying to stretch $12 into groceries for the week. The fridge hummed like it was mocking me, half a bottle of ketchup, 3 eggs, and air. Ellie sat at the table tracing doodles into the condensation of her water glass. Max was building Lego towers on the floor, humming to himself. Then the front door slammed so hard the walls shook. Dad stormed in, face flushed, eyes glassy. I smelled the booze before he spoke. "Where's Mom?" he barked. I shrugged, pretending casual. "She went out this morning." He muttered something about money, ripped drawers open, threw things around until he found the TV remote, then realized the TV itself was gone. His face twisted. "Where's the damn TV?" he roared. I froze. I'd thought Mom sold her jewelry last week for cash, but apparently she'd gone bigger. I tried to stay calm, stepping between him and the kids. "Maybe she pawned it, Dad. We needed to pay the electric bill." He sneered. "You don't tell me what we need." Then his fist hit the wall beside my head. Plaster rained down. Ellie screamed. Max started crying. Something in me snapped. The fear I'd swallowed for years turned to steel. I grabbed my siblings and ran to our room, shoving a chair under the doorknob. My heart beat like a warning drum. On the other side, Dad ranted about betrayal, about being disrespected in his own house. The door shuddered with every hit. I held Ellie's face close to mine and whispered, "It's okay, don't listen, he won't hurt us." I wasn't certain, but I said it anyway because children believe anything if you say it softly enough. After what felt like forever, silence fell. I heard the back door slam. He was gone. I dared to breathe. The next morning, our neighbor Mrs. Patel knocked quietly, eyes full of worry. She said she'd heard yelling and asked if we were all right. I lied again. "Just a little family fight," I said, cheeks burning. She hesitated. "If it happens again, I'll have to call the police." I nodded numbly, knowing her warning was mercy. For a few days, things calmed down. Mom came home sober or close to it and actually cooked noodles for dinner. She smiled at me, weak and crooked. "I know I've messed up, baby," she said while scraping burnt sauce from the pan, "but I'll get better, you'll see." I wanted to believe her so badly it hurt. I even let myself imagine a future where she meant it. Later that night, I tucked her into bed like she was one of the kids. She kissed my hand, the first gentle thing she'd done in months, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Lena." When I went to bed, tears came so suddenly I couldn't stop them. All the times I'd stayed silent, all the lies I'd told teachers, all the nights I'd convinced Ellie that love could still live in this house, they crashed down on me. I cried until dawn. The next evening shattered that fragile hope. Mom disappeared again, and Dad stumbled home worse than ever. He accused me of hiding her, of turning his children against him. When I tried to reason, he knocked a glass off the counter, shards scattering across the floor like sparks. Ellie stepped forward, and I threw my arm out to stop her just as a piece of glass sliced into my palm. I didn't even feel the pain until later. Adrenaline numbed everything. When he finally collapsed on the couch muttering nonsense, I cleaned the blood off the floor and bandaged my hand with an old shirt. I caught my reflection in the dark window, eyes swollen, jaw tight, exhausted beyond recognition. That was the night I admitted the truth to myself. Love wasn't enough to fix this. I was keeping us alive, but at the cost of my own soul. Somewhere deep inside, the part of me that still believed in miracles finally died, and what replaced it was resolve. Cold, clear, terrifyingly strong. After that night, survival became strategy. Feelings were useless currency. I started dealing in plans. My first mission was to build an escape fund. Every tip, every spare coin from the diner went into an old shoe box under my bed, tucked beneath a loose floorboard. I wrote "Don't give up" on the lid in black marker, like shouting quietly to myself. Tony, my boss, must have noticed something. One night, as I wiped down the counter, he said, "You work harder than anyone I've met, kid." I told him I liked staying busy. He just nodded, slid a small bag of leftovers toward me, and walked away. He never pried, but every once in a while he'd toss an extra 10 into my pay envelope by mistake. That unspoken kindness kept me from collapsing. I started tracking everything in a notebook: rent costs, grocery prices, bus fare estimates. I calculated that if I worked double shifts for 2 months, we could afford a small apartment, maybe even one with a door that actually locked. It sounded impossible, but so did everything about my life, and yet I was still breathing. Mom drifted in and out, ghost quiet, sometimes apologetic, sometimes wild-eyed and jittery. When she was gone, I told Max and Ellie she was visiting friends. When she returned, I'd lock our bedroom door until she fell asleep in another fog. Once Ellie asked, "Are we ever going to leave here?" I froze, then whispered, "Soon." She didn't ask again, but her face lit up each time I folded another bill into the shoebox. The routine became almost sacred. Wake before dawn, school, diner, homework by streetlight, sleep in bursts. Every night I'd count the cash like it was a prayer. There were times I wanted to throw it all out the window, scream that it would never be enough, but then I'd think of Max giggling at Saturday cartoons and Ellie braiding her own hair because I'd taught her how. Those tiny moments were proof I couldn't quit. I even found an apartment listing on a community board near the diner, tiny, aging, but cheap. The photo showed cracked tiles and sun-faded curtains. To me, it looked like freedom. I tore the ad down and tucked it between the pages of my notebook like a love letter to a future self. Every penny added to that box made my heart beat faster. Not with fear this time, but with possibility. Yet in the quiet hours when the house creaked and the city hummed outside, doubt slipped in. I'd stare at the box and whisper, "Please, just let me make it before something goes wrong." Because deep down I knew our family's chaos never stayed quiet for long, and fate loves to strike hardest right when you start believing you might escape. It was a Thursday again. Rain always seemed to mark the worst days. I came home from the diner with a paper bag of leftovers, humming softly so the kids wouldn't hear the exhaustion in my voice. The hallway smelled like smoke and wet carpet. Ellie met me at the door, eyes wide. "Dad's not home, Mom's gone again," she said. My stomach sank. Her voice trembled when she added, "It's been 2 days, Lane." I dropped the bag, pretending calm. "Okay," I said, "we'll be fine." I said those words so often they felt meaningless, but the kids needed the lie as much as I did. We ate cold fries for dinner, watched a scratched DVD until the power flickered out. The darkness wrapped around us like a warning. By the next afternoon, food was gone. I called the diner. Tony said I could pick up an extra shift if I wanted. I almost said yes, then realized I couldn't leave the kids alone again. Max was crying from hunger, Ellie pacing in circles, whispering that she wanted Mom back even if she was high. I tried to snap at her, but the words melted into a sob halfway through. That evening, I walked to the pawn shop, thinking maybe I could sell my old phone or one of Mom's broken bracelets. The clerk barely looked up before shaking his head. "Not worth much," he said. I didn't push. Pride's a luxury hungry kids can't afford, yet I still clung to it. When I got home, the street was flashing red and blue. My heart slammed against my ribs, 2 police cars, a few neighbors staring. Inside, Dad was slumped against the wall, wrists cuffed, shouting nonsense about how they took everything. I felt my throat close. An officer saw me and stepped forward gently. "You're Lena," I nodded. "We've got him." He started a fight outside the liquor store. I wanted to scream that he wasn't dangerous, just broken, but the words wouldn't come. Ellie hid behind me, Max clutching my leg. The younger officer crouched down to their level and said they'd be safer somewhere else tonight. I didn't even ask what that meant before social services showed up. It was like every nightmare I'd held off had kicked the door in. They asked about our mother. I told them she'd been gone 2 days. They exchanged a look that made me dizzy, the kind people reserve for hopeless situations. One woman touched my arm softly. "We're going to help," she said, and I almost laughed because that word, *help*, had always been code for *goodbye. I packed a small bag without thinking, 2 shirts each, 1 stuffed toy for Max, Ellie's notebook, and the shoe box of cash. But when I lifted the mattress, the box was gone. I froze, scanning the room in disbelief. Then I saw the broken floorboard pried up. Mom must have found it before she disappeared. The betrayal stung worse than hunger ever had. The drive to the foster center was silent except for Max whispering my name over and over like he could tether me to him by repeating. I tried to stay strong, but my hands kept shaking. At intake, we were split up, different rooms, different paperwork. I refused to let go of Ellie until they promised we'd be at least in the same building. She cried into my shoulder, saying, "We'll come home soon, right?" I nodded, hating myself for not knowing if that was true. That night, I lay on a strange bed, the sheets too clean, the air smelling like disinfectant and despair. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for anyone's dinner or laundry. It should have felt like relief, but it felt like losing my purpose. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes until my eyes blurred. Every sound in the hallway, doors creaking, distant footsteps made me flinch. The worker had said the kids were okay, but without seeing them, I couldn't believe it. My body ached from stillness. I pressed my wrist against my mouth to silence my crying. I whispered their names, Ellie first, then Max, like a prayer to no one. The rain outside turned to thunder, and each crack of lightning lit up the room for a heartbeat, framing me alone in this new emptiness. At that moment, I felt both utterly broken and quietly alive. For the first time, there were no lies left, no pretending, no control to grip, just truth. And even though that truth shattered me, somewhere in the wreckage was a faint flicker that maybe, just maybe, starting over wasn't the same thing as failing. The foster home smelled like detergent and soup, and that combination still makes my chest ache. The first couple of nights, I barely slept. Every creak made me think of the apartment door swinging open, my parents stumbling in. But there were no drunken voices here, just the quiet hum of order. The walls were covered in drawings from other kids. Bright colors, fake sunshine. I couldn't decide if it was comforting or insulting. Mrs. Alvarez, the woman who ran the home, was kind in a cautious way, like someone nursing her own old wounds. "You don't have to talk," she said when I first arrived. Just eat. She put a plate of spaghetti in front of me and I almost cried at the fact that someone had cooked it hot, intentional, not salvaged from leftovers. It stripped away all the numbness I'd wrapped around myself. I ate even though my stomach rebelled at first, unused to feeling full. Days blurred into routine. Therapy sessions with a social worker named Anna who never treated me like a case file. She'd ask gentle questions, too gentle sometimes, and let the silences stretch until I talked. When I finally did, it came out messy: guilt, fear, anger, exhaustion. I told her about the night Dad hit the wall, about Mom disappearing, about the shoe box of money that vanished like hope itself. She didn't flinch. She just handed me a tissue and said, "You did what grown-ups failed to do, you kept them alive." I didn't know what to say to that. For so long I'd worn guilt like skin, it felt wrong to set it down even for a minute. A month passed before they told me Ellie and Max were in separate homes nearby. I begged to see them. The first reunion was awkward. We stared at each other like strangers. Max kept tugging at my sleeve, asking when we were going home, and Ellie just looked at the floor. I whispered, "We're together, that's what matters." It sounded weak, but slowly weekend visits turned the three of us into a version of a family again. Somewhere between group therapy and math classes, the numbness faded. The world outside chaos felt suspiciously stable. I hated it at first. Then gradually I began breathing without panic. I learned how to take up space like a normal teenager, laughing in bursts with other kids, helping in the kitchen, finishing high school assignments. One afternoon, Mrs. Alvarez hugged me out of nowhere, saying, "You're different when you smile. Do it more often." I wanted to tell her that smiling felt like breaking some invisible rule, but I nodded and tried anyway. Letters became my lifeline. Ellie wrote in looping hearts. Max doodled superheroes protecting me like always. Sometimes I'd sit under the window at night, reading their notes until the ink smudged with tears. The pain of being apart never fully dulled, but it started feeling like pain with a purpose. Healing wasn't sudden, it crept in, stealthy and slow. I realized rescue doesn't always arrive as flashing lights or dramatic music. Sometimes it's a warm meal, a patient listener, a door that stays locked safely. The past still whispered, but its voice grew weaker. For the first time, I looked ahead and thought maybe life could be more than just surviving. Years slid by quietly, the kind of time that doesn't feel like healing until you look back and realize the wounds don't bleed anymore. I went to community college, juggling classes, and a part-time job tutoring kids who reminded me too much of myself. Every paycheck went toward a single dream: bringing Ellie and Max home. I'd visit them every month, watching them grow taller, their laughter less fragile. Ellie had this spark again. She joined a drama club and started talking about applying to art school. Max, always the builder, bragged about his science projects like they were NASA missions. Each time I said goodbye, the ache returned sharper. I promised one day we wouldn't have to say goodbye at all. When I turned 21, I filed for guardianship. The lawyer said it would be hard: age gaps, income checks, background reports, but I'd already fought harder battles. I told her the story start to finish, no sugarcoating. At the hearing, the judge looked at me, eyes soft but cautious. "You've carried a heavy load, Miss Carter. Why take on more?" he asked. I said the truth, steady and simple. "Because they're my family and I've already been their mom for half my life." Weeks later, the decision came in the mail. I sat on the floor of my tiny rented room, letter trembling in my hands, reading the words over and over until my tears blurred the ink. Petition granted. The day I reunited with Ellie and Max doesn't play like a movie. No dramatic music, no slow motion run. Just three people frozen in shock before colliding into a tangle of arms and sobs. That first hug felt like oxygen after years underwater. For a long time, no one spoke, and we didn't need to. We moved into a small apartment the next week. Tony from the diner, yes, he was still around, helped us carry second-hand furniture up the stairs. Ellie turned the living room wall into an art corner. Max called it home base. When we ate our first dinner together, spaghetti again, poetic or maybe just practical, I realized the quiet didn't scare me anymore. It was peace, not emptiness. One night, I got a letter from the rehab center. Mom had checked in again. My hands shook as I opened it. Her handwriting was uneven but familiar. She wrote about wanting forgiveness, saying she finally understood what she'd lost. For years, I swore I'd never reply, but I sat there, pen hovering, and felt something shift. Not pity, not trust, just the kind of exhausted love that refuses to die. I wrote back, "Dear Moms, I'm not ready to see you, but I don't hate you. I hope you heal." It wasn't closure exactly, it was space. The kind our love had never been allowed to occupy before. That night, I watched Ellie sleeping on the couch and Max snoring softly on the floor, and I realized the war was finally over. We weren't trophies. We weren't statistics. We were survivors who'd learned to build homes out of ruins. Our apartment isn't much: second-hand furniture, mismatched dishes, a single shelf sagging under textbooks and cereal boxes, but to us it's a palace. The first morning there, sunlight spilled through the curtains, and for the first time in years, no one was yelling. Ellie brewed coffee and managed to burn toast, laughing until tears ran down her cheeks. Max complained he didn't want to be late for school, and I almost cried at how normal that sounded. Ordinary chaos is the sweetest kind. I still wake up sometimes expecting old fears to claw at the door, but they can't find us here. The air smells like detergent again, but not the kind that covered misery. This one means clean sheets, fresh starts. I framed the judge's letter and hung it by the entryway. It's not decoration, it's proof that battles do end. Money's tight and life is far from easy. I work mornings at the diner, take evening classes, help Ellie with college applications, quiz Max on science terms over cheap pizza. Some nights I collapse on the couch, too tired to move, and Ellie throws a blanket over me, whispering, "You're still our hero, you know." I pretend to be asleep so she doesn't see me smile. We've started little traditions: game nights with popcorn dinners, movie marathons where Max does character voices, art fairs where Ellie sells her paintings for pocket cash. We argue about dishes and laugh about rent, but these arguments end in hugs, not slammed doors. The ghosts of our parents still linger, but they're quieter, like echoes fading into distance. Mom sends letters from rehab every few months. I read them, some sometimes reply. I'm not sure if forgiveness is a finish line or just another road to walk, but I'm walking it anyway. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the photo we took our first day here, just the three of us on the balcony, wearing thrift store sweaters and grinning like fools. There's a streak of sunlight cutting across our faces. I remember thinking how fragile joy felt then, like it might shatter if we breathed wrong. But months later, it's still here. Not perfect, not permanent, but ours. One night after everyone went to bed, I stood by the window watching traffic blur into ribbons of light. I thought about the girl counting coins under flickering bulbs, the one who used to believe survival was the same as living. She was so tired, so scared. I whispered to her from this future, "You made it." I imagined her looking up, exhausted but proud, realizing she didn't just survive, she transformed. I don't dream of being saved anymore. I don't wait for someone to pull us out of the fire. The truth is, I am the rescue. I'm the one who chooses safety every morning, who builds warmth out of scarcity, who teaches love without scripts. Our lives may be patched together, but so are quilts, and they keep you warm just the same. 600 words.